Today, we're getting into a space I know well, local government, or if you like, regional government, or in the case of America, it would be state government. It's one of the most misunderstood environments for a BA. People assume it's all slow process and red tape, but the truth is, it's where the real people centered systems get built. From job registration to building consents to community funding, local government touches nearly every citizen. So here are 10 things every BA needs to know about working in local government.
The Better Business Analyst Institute
presents the Better Business Analyst Podcast with
Benjamin Walsh.
One of the first jobs I ever had was actually a rates and property clerk at Hamilton City Council here in New Zealand. Nothing to do with IT really, but we used an ERP system. We rated properties. The city was growing. I dealt with property valuations, the rating of those, whether or not they were commercial or residential, whether or not a developer was developing a piece of land which was rural, which then needed to be brought into the city. And as the city was growing, we needed to kind of keep an eye on that because there were some sneaky rules where the rates categorization wouldn't change within a year. So one time there might have been a piece of land that was just next to a property development area. And then within the year, that would all be new properties, and that developer would save a year in rates and residential rates, only playing rural. So there was a whole lot going on with that. And I kind of got to a senior position there, maybe within a year and a half, 2 years. And then I got a role upstairs in the IT area, starting as a systems analyst. And so I spent quite a bit of time in this local government environment in Hamilton to a position where I left as kind of as a BA before going overseas. Now, also when I arrived in London, which was my first destination on my kind of overseas experience, but it was more than that, it was 7 years. I was lucky enough to have a British parents, so I had a British passport and I could go to Europe and Britain. And I first got a job there at Hackney Borough Council, which is one of the large councils in London. And it's the area where the London Olympics happened a few years later. It was quite an area that was getting gentrified, which means it was turned from a kind of a low income area to kind of a middle class area through investment, through getting rid of council flats or developing them, adding more parks and so forth. It's a huge council, and I worked there for a while. So this comes from my experience working within the local government sector. I also have friends who work in this area. And I wanted to give you these 10 things that every BA needs to know about working in local government. Number one, it's around the fact that you're delivering services, not products, okay? So most BAs and councils support public services, not commercial product lines. It's a completely different mindset. The outcomes are regulatory compliance, community well-being, and accessibility, and growing, your local community. An example here might be you're building a system for managing library memberships. It doesn't need to drive sales. It just needs to be usable by every age group in the community. And I recently went to the Wellington Library in the central area of Wellington. I live in the Lower Hutt area, which is a different council. And I used the library facilities to check out a startup book. And it was so easy. To be honest, the customer experience in that library was far superior to most businesses that I visit. So they got a big tick for usability there. The BA tip here is that you need to anchor your requirements in service outcomes like fairness, use of ease, efficiency for ratepayers. There's a few different dynamics there. It's not a product world. Number 2, governance and process rule the day. Everything is policy driven. That's why they exist, and they're under a microscope for that in terms of they don't spend ratepayers' money effectively. They are in trouble, and it's in the front of the news. You can't just move fast and break things like a startup world. It's on the other end of that spectrum. Change must often go through governance groups, public consultation, elected officials. You get the idea. The example is you propose changing a parking permit process. Council policy requires community feedback, formal sign-off before being rolled out. Okay, so it's not like the commercial world where you just do it and you test it and the customers drive that. The BA tip is you need to include governance checkpoints in your Agile BA plan from the Better Business Analyst Institute from day one. You won't speed things up by ignoring them. So you just need to know that the pace is a little bit slow. It's not like slow like central government, which is a little bit different because of hierarchy. We'll talk about that in a minute. But local government has a lot less people, so the hierarchy hasn't grown. That's not necessarily the case for, say, Hackney Borough Council, which was so big, the province is so big within, or the regional area is so big within London, it became almost the size of central government here in New Zealand. And in the UK, and this will be the case for the states and the states you live in, but you probably have councils below that. They took care of a much more services than central government. So in New Zealand, we're very small, and our central government takes care of, funding for hospitals, for example. I know you don't really have a public health system in the US too much, but in New Zealand and in the UK, it's public. So it's free to go to a hospital if you desperately need it. And, you pay a small amount to go see your doctor. So that was handled by central government, whereas in the UK, things like education, the school system, which is housed by central government in New Zealand, health and hospitals were looked after at that local level. And that will probably be the case in America, I imagine. Number 3 is funding cycles shape everything. So budgeting in local government often follows annual and long-term plan cycles. You see them published. They are under public scrutiny more than most. Projects may pause or shrink or shift scope based on funding availability or even election cycles. So a bit like, again, central government, but to be honest, these are central government usually will accept previous government's policy if they've already invested a lot. Local government is not the case. They seem to change much faster. An example might be a customer portal with scope for 12 features or 12, service offerings. But budget cuts mean you're now delivering only 4 and the rest are pushed to year 3 or maybe not done. The BA tip here is that you need to define a minimum viable scope early, so not a minimum viable product, but what is the scope that must be done, and tag everything else with cost-benefit priority levels, so cost-benefit specifically, not internal priority like you would with a corporation, and expect reprioritization. It will go up to a council level. Number 4, which is the point I was making earlier, is that you wear 10 hats. Many councils don't have large specialist teams. BAs are often the UX, the tester, the PM support, or even comms. And I found the next point, it's a brilliant training ground if you're adaptive. So I would say that the reason I'm quite flexible, adaptable, and the reason I've been so good in the private sector is because of the early grounding I had in the public sector, specifically local government, not central government. In the role in local government, I wasn't just the BA, I was the systems analyst, I was the application support analyst. I rolled out, I did training, I did VoIP phones, I helped doing project coordination, I did everything. And it was perfect for someone who was quite young, who was motivated. And then the people around me, they really recognized me and helped me grow, and they wanted to invest in that. So local government, if you're having trouble getting work, I highly recommend doing that. You don't want to have a CV full of it, but if you can start there or even do an internship there, you will get much more value than you would, say, for example, central government. And saying that, consultancies, if you want to go down that path and you need the intern program, that's great. But of course, that's very competitive. So maybe start looking at local government options. The example here is you're brought in to map a process maybe, and suddenly you're facilitating workshops, writing the business case and helping test the prototype. And that was very, very much what I got to do. And to be honest, you're left to your own devices because there aren't many people managing you and there's so much to do. So I got to do some amazing things. The BA tip here is be clear on your role, but be willing to flex. Okay, you can't specialize in smaller local councils. In the UK, different, massive. London, huge. But just make sure you document and you communicate as you go and make sure people do know what you're doing, even if they're not asking because they're so busy. Number 5 is that the tech landscape is a patchwork. So it's not a place where architects get their dream, but they typically involved in some of these projects. Councils typically have aging systems, custom build, off the shelf, or vendor lock-in, especially for local government. It's so regulatory that they really work with external vendors. You never really see an in-house product that's managing all those different various systems. And those are big players. They move slowly, they charge a lot. There's a lot of opportunity in the local government space to do things better. Integration is often the most expensive and time-consuming part of the project. And I put that into my notes here because it's so true. I mean, we had a system, it was called Authority, Civica Authority. They exist both in Australia and the UK, or they did back in the day. And they pretty much in Australia, they have a lot of the local government game. And to be honest, New Zealand and Australia legislation is not far off each other. They came to the New Zealand market, and to be honest, we wanted to integrate with the system, and it was using this old Informax back end, had no integration. So we had to pay when we did this national dog database, which was sending local government dog registration data to central government. We had to customize the hell of it. Then another council had to do exactly the same thing and had to pay for custom integration. There was no APIs, there was no XML. So this just tells you the kind of world you live in when you work in local government, and the vendors are not necessarily great. You need to connect the rates database, for example, to a new self-service portal. It's hosted on-prem, undocumented, and written in Delphi. That's a good example. I can think of another example where I was trying to, early days, so this is quite a few years ago now, allow online payments, which was quite a new thing. So online payments to pay your rates. And it became all too hard because you needed to obviously verify that someone was that someone had chosen their right rates properly. We could do that all internally. We wanted to send the amount to the bank. We wanted them to have some metadata with that to reconcile that the money was for this particular rates account. And it became all too hard because technology just wasn't there to share that information. Even though, a few years later, that technology exists and that's how you pay rates now. Still not done great for local government, I have to say. The BA tip here is always map technical constraints early, meet the IT team, know what you're dealing with before you propose something. I mean, you're probably in the IT team, to be honest, if you're a BA, but make sure that if there's an external party, you're meeting with them as well. Number 6 is that staff are overloaded. There is never enough hours in the day when you work in local government. They are stretched thin. Your project is probably one of 10 things they're juggling. They have probably done this project before, and it's failed or stopped, and there's probably 5 people asking them the same question. What you find in local government, which you find in all organizations, but specifically local government, is that you have a few drifters and you have a few key people that run the place, and they are the knowledge kings, but they love that, okay? And so personalities start developing, but you rely on them for a lot of IP. You need to reduce, not add to these people's burden, and you need to keep things simple, and you need to build rapport with them. An example might be you're running 4 workshops in a week with the building consents team or resource consents team. Burnout kicks in and you lose them halfway, right? That happens a lot. The tip here is to design your elicitation and validation sessions for low disruption. You use pre-work, a lot of pre-work, asynchronous feedback and empathy, and maybe do one-on-one interviews if you can. But it'd be great to get them all in a room for at least one session. The number 7 is that change management is critical. Many council staff have been in the role for 10 years plus. They've chosen the role for a reason. It's probably close to home. They probably care about the area. It's pays below the average wage probably, or, average wage for the role they do, but they enjoy it. And change is hard. We've always done it this way is real and sometimes valid. And you do get a lot of what black box thinkers in local government, where it's really hard to move them on. A team might refuse to use a new CRM system, and you include 2 legacy fields that they still rely on, and then it switches them. Even though those 2 fields don't really do anything, it might be enough to make them feel a part of the process. You need to really change management, and local government is really important. If you're going to pay for someone in your team, change manager would be great. You need to partner with them. You need to map impacts to role, and you need to bake change into your BA artifacts. And it's not an afterthought in local government. You really need to be hot on change management. Number 8 is that the community is a stakeholder, even when they don't know it. Ratepayers are the ultimate end users, even if they're not sitting in your workshops. Accessibility, equality, transparency, who's paying for what, where their money's going, must be baked into every decision. An example here is a payment system upgrade improves internal process, but removes the pay in installments option used by low-income ratepayers, right? And you need to consider them. So you need to use personas that reflect real community segments, migrants, elderly, digital literate people. There's all sorts of people that just want things done. Don't design for council staff. Please do not do that. Another story here, when I worked in there as a rates property clerk, I got called up about from an elderly lady who had seen that the stadium that the council was building would mean a rate increase for her. Okay, that she realized that she was going to pay more rates. And so I worked out exactly how much that was at the same time as talking to this lady, and she vented her frustrations to me about why was she paying for a stadium she would never use. I worked out exactly how much she was paying each year towards that initiative, which was, of course, a community initiative that she didn't think she was getting value from. I talked about the events that were on at the stadium that weren't well marketed to her. And there were things that were outside of the rugby that she wasn't interested in. Rugby union is a huge sport in New Zealand. And what they actually had at the stadium that weren't advertised, especially to her demographic, was the fact they had marching, they had some other events that she actually really enjoyed. And I explained that she could actually get a free bus there. So I was able to convince her that she did get value out of the stadium, even when she didn't think so. And I didn't talk about indirect, I talked about direct benefits here. And that wasn't my job, but as a member of the council, it was my job to kind of let her know that she was getting some value out of this investment. And I may not have found anything she was interested in, right? But what was interesting is I worked out she was paying a cent more each year towards the stadium as part of her bill. And by explaining that to her, she had a nice conversation. She got value from it. I distinctly remember it because she was happy when she left the conversation with me. So the community is a stakeholder even when they don't know it or know where their money's going. Number 9, documentation is actually a deliverable in local government. Councils often require detailed documentation for audit, public records, future use. Councils get hit with Public Information Act all the time, so they have to disclose information about decisions and your name will be all over it. Good artifacts aren't a bonus, they are the backbone in local government, so you need to do it well. You need things like version control. You need to make sure that you're publicly, like this is the working copy, this is the public copy. Records management is key. You might be asked to hand over the BA plan, data model, workshop notes, decision log, even though it was agile. Okay, and write like you're not, the tip is write like you're not the only one who's going to be supporting this in 12 months, because you probably won't be, and that document may be released publicly. That is the case in central government to some degree, but not really. Local government, much worse. Number 10 is your work supports real communities. The systems you analyze can have an impact on how someone gets a building permit, right? To build their dream home, books a venue, applies for funding. Local government work is really glamorous. It really is glamorous. Okay, but it's hugely meaningful, and you will know someone in the community that you're helping. You can improve the dog registration process, right, for registering your dog, and you can make it easier for 10,000 households in a day and cut telephone call volumes in half. The BA tip is go talk to frontline customer staff, work on the frontline, ask for it as part of your employment contract to actually experience once a month on the phones for half a day. They know where the real problems are, and they'd love that someone finally asked. Working in local government teaches you patience, humility, and systems thinking. It's a sector where the stakes aren't about profit. They're about community trust, service delivery, and public good. And if you want to grow as a BA and develop your kind of delivery skills, it's a great place to start your career. If you want to have a real impact for real people, this is the space to do it. Share this with someone working in council or thinking about making the leap or getting into business analysis, and keep asking better questions.